Welcome back to Healthy Returns. So I'm your host Vic Windia, and in this episode I'm joined by Stewart Bartlett, CEO of Ferronova. We'll discuss how the company is working to improve cancer surgery through precision imaging. Now, before we start, just a quick disclaimer: Healthy Returns is an independent initiative that's separate from my role managing healthcare investment funds at Perennial Partners. So while it aligns with my broader mission to highlight and help train the necessary capital to advance potentially life-saving and life-changing healthcare innovations, it isn't affiliated with a representative of Perennial Partners, and so the views expressed herein are solely my own. Stuart, thanks for coming along and sitting in the hot seat. It's great to have you here. You're in Sydney for a few days promoting your wonderful business, and so I thought we might just have a quick chat while you're here. Give us a 30-second introduction.
Journey. So I'm an electronic engineer and started in semiconductor design many years ago. Moved into consumer audio and got into the medtech industry about 25 years ago. I co-founded a handheld ultrasound business, and that got me into the medtech area. And after I moved on from that, after 12 years, I jumped over to Ferronova and have been running Ferronova for about 8 years now.
Yeah, great. Well, it's good to hear you're an engineer because the engineers make it happen. Maybe just as a sort of introduction about Ferronova, what does it do? How's it going to help patients?
Yep.
And where you're up to.
So Ferronova is essentially an image-guided cancer surgery company. We came out of universities in Australia and New Zealand. They started working with an esophageal cancer surgeon back in about 2010. She was doing a PhD in what's called sentinel lymph node biopsy and esophageal cancer, which is trying to identify the lymph nodes that have cancer in them. It's a big unmet need. Both esophageal cancer and stomach cancer, which are our two primary indications, are very difficult cancers to treat. If patients are diagnosed early enough, they will have surgery, but surgery tends to either overtreat patients in that they remove the entire esophagus and stomach and up to 100 lymph nodes, and often they don't need to do that, or it undertreats them because they miss a lot of lymph nodes that have cancer in them. And as a consequence, the 3-year survival in Australia after cancer surgery is really poor. It's less than 50% in both cancers, and we're trying to resolve that.
Yeah, okay. And so how does it do that precisely?
So it's using a technology which is an iron oxide nanoparticle, and it gets injected essentially into the primary tumour. It will follow the same pathway that the cancer cells follow, and it will go to the lymph nodes that the cancer will metastasise to first. So what you really want to do in surgery to make it curative is to remove those lymph nodes in the primary tumour before it's had a chance to metastasise to the rest of the body when the 5-year survival sort of drops to about 8%. So we're identifying those draining lymph nodes, and one of the really complicating factors in these cancers is that most patients have chemotherapy and radiotherapy before surgery, and so technology which works very well in breast cancer, where this sort of method standard of care, just does not work. It's a dye and a radioactive isotope. It needs to be injected at the time of surgery. So if patients have chemotherapy before, it has to happen after that. And the chemotherapy damages the lymphatic system. The pathway that the cancer cells follow, the dye that you inject after chemo, only follows that pathway about 25% of the times. Our technology is an iron oxide particle, which is designed to be injected before, but remain in those lymph nodes for 6 months. That enables that injection to be up front, chemotherapy, chemoradiation, and then surgery, and surgeons can still find those nodes.
Yeah, okay. And so how do they actually go about finding them?
So there's two things that happen to help them do that. So one is that the particles in those lymph nodes are visible on MRI. So before surgery, they've got a plan and they know where those nodes are. And then we make a surgical device, which is a magnetic detector. And so during the operation, they can use that device to make sure that they remove.
Like a beach comb.
It is like a little beeping beach camera. They tend to turn off the beep because it's too annoying. So we just have a number on the screen when they know they've hit the jackpot, basically. That just confirms that they're in the right bit of tissue. They'll then remove that bit of tissue.
Does it sort of drain just to the nearest node, or does it just keep going through the system?
So it does drain to the nearest node. Every trace is going to drain to the nearest node. One of the things that's novel about our technology, and is really covering most of our patents, we have about 28 patents, is that we put a ligand on it that targets receptors in the lymph nodes. Over 90% of the iron oxide nanoparticles are retained in that primary node. We can do the injection, do one scan, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after, and they can still see where those draining nodes are.
Okay, so where are you up to?
So we've used our technology in about 92 patients in clinical trials so far. So we started our first in human trials in about 2020. We did a total of 30 patients in those studies, and the technology worked really well. It had 100% accuracy. You couldn't ask for more than that. There was no safety concerns. So the most recent study, we've just completed enrolment of 62 patients. We will be completing the surgeries. There is a delay between injection and surgery of, usually up to around three or 4 months.
Yeah, okay.
And it shrinks the tumour down. So we have to wait until those patients go through surgery and then they get their pathology so we can finalise all the data. But that should be happening in the next few months. And we hope to publish that data by the middle of this year. So following on from these studies, we'll be moving on to a registrationals late this year or early next year, and that will be in Australia and Europe. And we'll be using that in our regulatory application.
Okay, well, that's pretty exciting. Australian technology going global.
Yep.
What's the sort of time frame for regulatory approval, do you think, if all goes according to plan?
Yeah, it's probably 3 to 4 years from now. So it will take us, as I mentioned, late this year or early next year to get the trial up and running. Enrollment in that study, we're thinking it's going to be about 18 months. It's not a long-running study. Because of the delayed surgery, it's another 6 months to collect all the data, and then we can submit those applications. So that's the plan. It's about 125 patients that we need enrolled. So it's not a massive registrational study. And so it should be relatively timely to get those patients enrolled.
Okay. What's the sort of market potential for this, do you think?
It's a substantial market. So it's driven really by the cost per patient. And so, and what really drives for us what we can charge per patient is what the overall health economic situation is. And we've had discussions with a number of insurance companies in America, and right now the cost to treat recurrence is really expensive. So after a patient has surgery, if it comes back, they then are effectively a stage 4 patient, and they'll have pretty aggressive and expensive treatment. What's happened in recent years is new immune therapies have been approved to treat recurrence, and they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The estimate in the US and some studies have shown that it's about $430,000 to treat a recurrence. So that enables us to have a price point of around $10,000 per dose and still save the overall system money. The insurers don't bat an eyelid. They're very keen to see the real world data and see these $438,000 claims to be reduced.
Yeah, that's a sort of health economic win. Is there an analogous product that you can say to?
Probably the closest, but it's not really directly analogous, are the radiopharmaceuticals that are used for diagnostics. So they're typically between like US $5,000 and $15,000, and so we're in that price range.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks very much for joining me today.